I'm going to have her come up and keep the storytelling tonight rolling. Marilyn McPhie, everyone.
Thanks. I'm glad that you're all keeping warm and hydrated. Apparently that's the important thing, right? So this is a story that comes from Scotland, and one of my favorites. You know, the McPhies come from Scotland. From long, long ago. The legend has it that my husband's family was descended from Selkies. It didn't show up on the ancestry, DNA test, but it's true. We all know it, right? Well, this is a story about a young laird who had a heart of gold. People said that, everyone said that, because he was so good and so kind, and he just couldn't stand to see anyone suffer at all if there was anything that he could do about it. And well, he'd had a few rocks in his life. When he was a small boy, his mother died. This happens a lot in stories. They get rid of the mothers early on, because the truth is, in order to have a good story, you've got to have conflict, you've got to have disaster, you've got to have problems. And well, mothers, they just soothe all that over. They don't let you go out and stay too late or get off the path or anything. You got to kill the mothers really, really early. Well, the old Laird, the father, he wept and mourned and wept and mourned and wept and mourned. And one day he noticed that his son looked so much like his mother that whenever he looked at his son, he thought about his wife, and that made him weep all the harder and mourn all the more. And so finally, in the end, he decided to send his son to live with some relatives in the north. And the son was there for a good decade. Finally, the old Laird himself died, and they sent for the son, the young Lairdy, they called him. They sent for the son to take over the estate. Well, he didn't know quite what to expect. It all sounded pretty good. He had a lot of land divided into a lot of farms. He had a lot of tenants on the farms that paid quarterly rent. And he had a village and a kirk and a castle. Sounds great, huh? The reality was a little less great. A lot of the farms there on the estate, they'd been abandoned and they'd gone to wreck and ruin. And as for the tenants, some of them could pay. Some of them even had boxes of silver underneath the bed. But they always said, "Oh, we're so poor, we can't possibly pay the rent." And the old Laird hadn't really paid much attention to that. And some of the tenants truly were poor and couldn't afford to pay. And others were just lazy and shiftless, and, well, we know what we think about them. But they didn't pay, of course. Well, so when the young Laird came and he saw the village, he saw the church, it looked pretty good from the outside, but when he went inside, there was a hole in the roof, and it looked more like a barn than a kirk. And then he went to the castle. The castle wasn't much better. In fact, the only really good thing about the castle were the servants. They had been employed there for a long, long time, and they loved the old Laird, and they were eager to transfer their loyalty. The young Laird too. Well, when the young Laird went into the accounting room and pulled out the books, which probably some of you are doing. It's coming to the end of the year, right? Have you started tallying things out? Well, he was absolutely in despair. There was hardly enough money to keep bread and soup on the table, and nobody given him any magic stones or anything, so it couldn't do that. And he wondered what to do. Well, anybody he talked to said, well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to let all the employees go. This is just not sustainable. But he was loath to do that because some of them were approaching, well, they were gray-haired, they were getting kind of old, and he thought, well, who would want them to be servants? And if I fire them, they'll just starve. He couldn't manage that because, as I told you, he had a heart of gold. And so he kept those old servants around, but he was absolutely frantic knowing what to do. He would go out to collect the rent, and they would all say, oh, but we are so poor. The weather has been terrible, climate change and all, and the crops haven't been doing well, and there's that, the whole thing with China, and no, we can't sell anything, and we can't possibly afford to pay rent, even the people who had the boxes of silver underneath the bed. And so, once again, he would come back to the castle, and he would look at the books and just wonder how he was going to keep things together. Well, it happened that the next time to collect rent was around about the time of winter solstice. And so he went out to hear one sad story after another, and he went back to the castle, But as he was coming down the road, he reached a crossroads. And there beside the road, he saw what he took to be some junk. Children's toys, possibly, a few dolls in there. But then he looked a little more closely and, whoa, those things that he took to be dolls, they were moving. Yeah, spooky, right? Anyway, he realized that they were actually brownies. Brownies. And he looked, I know, and he looked at, not that kind of brownies. You know, sort of little trollish, fairy type brownies. I know you're saying, yum. No, this is not a cannibalism story. I'm sorry. And so he said, wait, what are you doing here? And one of the brownies stepped forward and said, I am Lackey Tosh, and this is my clan. And these are my children and their spouses and their children and their spouses and their children and there were a lot of brownies there. And the young Laird said, well, you're out here in the snow and everything. What are you doing? They said, well, we're flitting. He said, flitting? Yeah, we're leaving. We're moving. Well, where are you flitting from and why are you flitting? I said, well, you know, for centuries and centuries, we have been the brownies at the mill. But the mill owner's wife died and he has married a town-born woman. Oh, what could be worse than a town-born woman? And she has no love in her heart for brownies. And so she's even gotten a couple of cats to worry our bairns and dogs to make our lives unpleasant. And finally, well, we decided we just have to flit. But where are you flitting to? Well, that's the problem. We just don't know. Do you have any suggestions? And the young lady said, of course. Come to the castle. We got plenty of room. It's not much, but we're happy to share. And Lackey Tosh turned around. Everybody gave him big thumbs up. They said, we'll take it. And so all the brownies moved to the castle. Lackey Tosh on the way, he said, so how are things at the castle? He said, well, we've repaired the roof. You'll have a roof over your head and bread and cheese, maybe not much else. Oh, the housekeeper does have 2 cats, but they're old cats. They're very mellow. They won't bother you. Well, when he came back to the castle with all the brownies, the housekeeper was quite surprised at that. She was. But when the young Laird said why they'd been flitting, they said, oh, the poor wee things. They're welcome here. And so the brownies all moved in, and things turned out pretty well. The fires seemed to burn brighter. The work seemed to get done faster. And because they were so happy and they were all singing all the time, and they'd somehow made some arrangements with a local meadery to get meat, and that made everybody happy. And so things were looking up there in the castle. Alas, out in the rest of the estate, things were not looking up so much. And so when the winter solstice came around and the Laird went out to collect the rent and heard again story after story, hard luck after hard luck, he finally came back. He looked at the books and he thought, I just don't know how I'm going to do it. Lackey Tosh went striding into the room and said, you know, your problem is you've got a heart of gold. He said, that's a bad thing? He said, well, in this case, it kind of is a bad thing. You know what you need? You need a factor, somebody who will take charge of the estate and collect the rent. And I said, but I can't afford a factor. I can hardly afford what I've got now. Who would work for nothing? And Lackey Tosh said, well, as it happens, I would. You would? Said the young Laird. Yes, I would. Okay, said the young Laird. You're hired. Give that man an extra portion of the stone soup. Yeah. And turn up the volume on this mic, too. Thanks. And so it began, a flood of letters. Everybody on the estate got letter after letter written in a small but very neat handwriting, telling them to fix up their barns, to mend their fences, and to pay their rent. He said, I know some of you've got silver under the bed. And who is, well, they were all signed, Lackey Tosh, factor, and they were like, who is this Lackey Tosh? And how does he know so much about us? But they began to paint the fences and fix up the barns, and some of them even coughed up the rent, and some of their children, they got jobs in the town, and so they could afford to pay more rent. And I don't know exactly how that happened. A little bit of magic, brownie magic, I guess, but their crops seemed to do better, and their harvests were better. And you know, there was an agreement there with the Chinese about the imports, and that seemed to raise the whole
confidence level around that place, and they were getting rid of some of the leaders that people didn't like that much, and that was good. And so things were just really looking up. And so the young Laird, when he looked at the books, he was quite pleased. And then Lucky Tush came in with a rather stern look on his face, and he said, "Two things. You need two things." "I don't know. Things are going well, thanks to you." I said, "What do I need?" He said, "Well, first thing you need is you need to get a new suit of clothes. You're all ragged and shabby looking. Why, nobody'd even believe that you were the Laird of an entire estate. You get yourself into town and get yourself a new suit of clothes." And so he did. And Lucky Tush said, "And you can afford it too." He went into the tailor, and a week later he came back looking dapper. And the young Laird said, "But I think there were two things you said I needed. What's the other one?" "Can you guess?"
A woman.
"A woman. You need a wife." He said, "I haven't even had a chance to think about such a thing. And who would have me, and where would I find the lass who would marry me?" I said, "Well, look around, meet some girls, sign up on one of those internet dating sites, Tinder or something, and see what you can find." Yeah. And so he first went to the relatives who lived in the north, and they introduced him to a rather beautiful young lass. And he started asking some questions, and then a question popped into his mind, and he said, "So what do you think about brownies?" And she said, "Oh, well, I don't think about them at all because I don't believe they exist." Not the girl for him. He went to visit some relatives in the south, and they introduced him to a very refined young woman, extremely well educated, and he just got right to the point. He said, "What do you think about brownies?" And she said, "Well, as everyone knows, that is the reason the peasants give for the disappearance of the ancient Picts." I said, "No, not for me." He went to visit some relatives in the west, and they introduced him to a girl who said, "Brownies? I've never met one, but I don't think I would like them." And so he went to visit relatives in the east, and the girl that they introduced him to, she said, "Oh, brownies? Oh, horrid little creatures, disgusting, worse than mice." Well, he came back home feeling rather discouraged about the whole wife-searching thing. It just hadn't been working out for him. But as he was coming back to the castle, he happened to pass by the mill, and there on a bench in front of the mill was the miller's daughter. She was quite beautiful. She was also known to be kind and intelligent, and extremely strong and fierce and brave, and all the things that women are supposed to be these days. Beautiful is just not going to be enough. But she looked quite sad, and so he said to her, "Why are you sad?" And she said, "Oh, I fear that I must leave." He said, "Why?" She said, "Have you heard of wicked stepmothers?" He said, "Well, yeah, but isn't that mostly a myth? Most of the stepmothers I've ever met were really pretty nice." She said, "Not mine. We simply don't agree on anything. She is town-born," as though that was the worst thing you could be, right? He said, "So I'm going to leave. I just don't know what I'm going to do." And he said, "Well, so what do you think of brownies?" And she said, "Oh, the sweet things. When my mother was alive, we always had brownies at the mill, but they went flitting, and I don't know where they have flitted to." He said, "I can fill you in on that. Perhaps you should follow me back to the castle." And so the young Laird brought that miller's daughter back to the castle, and when she saw the brownies, they embraced her, and she felt like she was home. 2 days later, there was a big wedding. They had singing and dancing and music and food and all the mead anyone could want, and everybody from the town was having the greatest time. They didn't notice, or maybe they noticed and just didn't care, that there in the middle of all the celebration were a whole troop of brownies. And so things went quite well. The brownies were happy, the miller's daughter was happy, all the servants were happy, everybody in the whole estate was happy. And why would they not be, seeing as how they had a Laird who had a